So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this coffee morning session where we're looking at making decisions based on insights. And obviously, as we go through today, we're going to try and look at all of the reporting analytics from a proposition perspective with what you can do and how you can get started. So just way of a quick introduction, my name is Andrew Wilcox. I'm a solution consultant at Workday. And my primary role is obviously looking at anything that's reporting analytics. We look at Prism, and we also look at people analytics as well. Just before we begin, the Workday Safe Harbor statement, we ask that you base any purchasing decisions on features and functions that are generally available in the product as of today, and not based on any forward-looking statements. Everything we're going to go through today is obviously already generally available in the product, but yeah, it's just to cover if I do mention from the questions point of view something that may be a future. So I wanted to start really by when we look at reporting analytics, what is how do you get started? What is some of those best practices? And so when we look at the content we're going to go through today, I thought we'd break it down into three areas. When we look at reporting analytics for everyone within your organization, everyone will want the data formatted and given to them in a different manner. It may be the same data, but the way they want to consume it or the questions they want to ask could be different. And so we're going to look at that. And then we'll look on to other aspects that can influence that as well. And so on that key point, when we look at reporting, we do need to go out to that user population to see what is it that they want. And sometimes, even though they may ask for something, it might not be exactly what they really wanted. It may be that the questions they ask evolve from what you give them, I guess, in that first instance. And so they may be asking for some type of attrition reports, but what they really want is maybe, where are they losing high performance? So it's only with that idea of showing something or giving some of that visual data insight that they can then start to develop the questions that they really want to get answered. And so when we look at that, let's look at this from an analytics proposition and look at what may be useful for those different populations within our organization. And so, yeah, as we've just mentioned, people want those reporting analytics because they want to make better decisions with their data. They want to take specific action. And so if I'm a manager with a particular team, maybe it's compensation time, who do I give my pay rises to? I might be allocated a certain budget. So I might be looking at it from performance. I might be looking at it from a past history. But I want to make those decisions, and I want to use the data I've got within the Workday system to help me make those decisions. And so when we use that, we want to use it in different ways. And now we use the data, or we translate that data that we have within Workday itself into something meaningful, into what we call that insight layer. So obviously it could be from a business insight perspective, we want those Workday reports and dashboards. We want to put reports into workers profiles, onto supervisory org profiles, maybe onto org charts. But we want on that day-to-day basis, that functional use of that particular product as we're using Workday on that day-to-day basis. And so when we look at that, the population within your organization using those Workday reports would be your everyday users of Workday. So, from HCM perspective, finance, but all of your employees really, because they'll be using those Workday reports, maybe, as I just mentioned, in that worker profile. They want to look at that on a weekly or monthly basis. When we then move on to discovery boards, discovery boards are more of that data visualization piece, the idea from a self-service perspective. You can go and explore your data sets. Can you find insight by creating different visuals? What means something to someone? And so from the perspective of the user groups that might want to use that, you might have an analytics team. Now, it doesn't have to be a purpose-built analytics team that you set up in the organization. It could be people that are interested in analytics within particular teams. Excuse me. Maybe you have an analytics, a sales and marketing team, and there are people within there that want to or have an interest in analyzing data. And for them, you know, using the data, drag and drop, drilling in might be perfect for what they want to consume. Now, when we do that, obviously, once we've created something from a dashboard perspective, you know, we can start to push that out to audiences because they don't want to necessarily do all that true self-service, but they might just want to filter the data or drill in. When we look at slides, you know, we might want to create exec board packs, or we might want to push this down into managers if we don't want them all trying to drill into the data. So again, you know, we can take our data. Not everyone wants that dashboard perspective, so we can start to push insight or analysis down to particular people. But within slides, we don't have to take the data out of Workday to achieve that. When we look at sheets, so sheets could be used for a number of different purposes, I guess, from both finance and HCM perspective, but one example might be just the way you use it with Excel. The idea, you can take your Workday data and start to analyze your data, not from a historical perspective, because you can see that in your discovery boards and Workday reports, what's happened in the past, but you might want to use it to what if. So what if I've got all my compensation data and I go to make these merit increasing changes, what's that going to affect, you know, something I might be monitoring like gender pay gap? Can I see that? And so if we can have this sandbox or this what if scenario, I can play with my data before I actually make those decisions. Now, from an Office Connect perspective, this is more for finance. This is a little bit more using Excel with a plugin, but it will allow you to connect to maybe your adaptive planning or directly into your financials within Workday to have a look at that data and start to, again, do that self-service, but in a Excel-driven format. And I guess the final part of this, obviously, BERT reports. These are more for your pixel perfect. You know, you want to create PDFs of like invoices. You want to create maybe statements for bonuses or letters for employees, and you push that out with some visuals and text and things within there. And so they're created in that. And I guess you push that out to, it could either be out to customers or to employees as populations or groups. And so that covers what we're looking at from everything we see on there is part of your Workday subscription. So you can use all of that. And from this perspective, you can start to, when you discover what the end users want, you can obviously then start to look to develop the analytics, all the reports using any of those different insights, and you can start to push that information out to. And so I guess once we understand what an end user sort of wants, you know, they might be asking certain questions. So we frame that data that we have and we push that out in the formats to them. It might be that some want a dashboard. It might be that you need to create some insight for them that needs to be pushed out in those slides. So maybe those exec board packs. So how do you get started with the data? Because obviously you need to understand that data to be able to put it in there and start to push it out to them. So it might be you need information or examples so that you can start to build on that. So what we're going to look at now is, you know, what are the examples out there that may already be in the Workday system, or different examples you could start to download and use. Those are the packaged application, so that you can actually get up and running quickly with that from a core reporting perspective. So we can do a quick demo just to show some of this information. And so if we go quickly into my environment, one of the ways, or one of the things you can start to look at is standard reports. So you can run a task, say all standard reports, and there are going to be lots in here. And this is part of the Workday Analytics, in the fact there could be lots of different reports already here. You know, which one do you want to use? And so we can start to search for particular areas or topics. And there will be a bit of discovery. What is it that you see in these reports that would help you create additional ones? Or could this be a starter for 10? It's 50% of what you want. You just need to change a few elements. And so you have that ability then to start to take these reports, copy them to your custom reports and start then maybe to use that in what you want to push out to others. And so you could take something like this compare workers. It tells you what type of Workday report it is. It's a transpose report. So in your core reporting for your Workday reports, you can have obviously matrix transposed, advanced reports, the different data and the formats that you can use. So it tells you what it is. And then you could start to look at this, could you run it? From this perspective, what does it show you within that data? I can pick some elements within my workforce, and I can start to compare certain people within these reports. And so when we run that, this is how the report's set up. We can then start to compare certain people and the elements that were in that report. And as we said, this might look at compensation and talent and qualifications and tenure, but then this could be a way for you to get started. Can you take this report? Can you copy it, modify it, and put in the elements that you want that would be useful for your members of your teams? Now, the standard reports are already within the system, but there are other elements to reporting that we provide as part of the packaged application. And so if I just quickly go into community, so if you go to Workday Community, you could search within here and say you want to search for package solutions. Now, when we look for the package solutions within community, we'll get a page that we can look at to show you all of the available package solutions that you can use for your system. Now, within here, as we scroll down, you could start to look at certain ones. So Vibe Central, this is just a reporting product. You could look at reporting for ESG, and it will tell you how you can deploy these yourself. So they could be customer or service engagement. But the idea is you could take these particular reports, download them to your system, and you could start using them straight away. So if we do quickly click back to my reports into my system, I can then start, once they're downloaded, these will run off your Workday data, so I can start to look at things like the Vibe Central. And again, there'll be a number of, within this dashboard, there'll be a number of pre-built reports, and you can start to look at this to see, as a quick win, is this the type of information that my population requires? And or, can we offer this to them? They have a look, and then we can obviously look to customize or modify this based on what their particular requirements are. So again, maybe they do want like a pipeline funnel, so they can see from a hiring or recruiting perspective where we have that drop off from those process from recruiting between maybe genders, or you want to look at from ethnicity. There's lots of different ways you could then cut that data. Again, if we wanted to look from an ESG perspective, the other one I showed quickly on the packaged application, again, we can start to look at this from maybe organizational health. Are there reports within, obviously, this pre-built solution that your organization would get value from? And so if they're already pre-built, again, you can start to look at this data, find the reports, take the specific ones that you're really interested in, and then again, could you modify these to suit or be that specific purpose? So when we talked earlier about discovery boards and people want to do that self-service, when we look at these from a Workday report perspective, there is overlap in the functionality, but it may be that, as I said, in that everyday use of your Workday system, those end users will be using more those Workday reports, and rather than self-service, they have to go build the things themselves. Can they have that ability to start to drill into that data and find the information themselves, so they can start to look at not just viewing in that particular insight itself, but, being able to drill, does that drilling give them that additional insight they require to help answer those questions that might not be fulfilled from that original visualization as they see it at the beginning. Now, if I do click back very quickly into the packaged applications, when we looked at Vibe Central and we looked at that social reporting for ESG, those were just some pre-built reports that you can put on your system. Now, within here, depending on the SKUs that you have, you can obviously take advantage of other elements that may be available as well. And so if I do search within here for ESG, for example, I'm sorry, didn't mean to search there. Let me go back to my previous screen. When you look at the reports as such, you can look through that big list and you can start to find other reports that may be of value. And so, but with that, there may be the additional SKUs that you require. So when we looked at that first ESG report, that was just reporting off your Workday data. When we go into the finance section here, there is one again on ESG, but it's supplier sustainability. And so it will actually tell you then the additional SKUs that may be required to take advantage of this particular package application for a reporting perspective. So this might need financials, or it may need Prism or Extend. So an example of the additional SKUs. But once you have, or if you have those additional SKUs, you can then see that they provide maybe additional reporting from a discovery board perspective and some of that pipeline in the Prism perspective to help build you that insight or analysis. So again, you could take these packaged applications, although they may use different SKUs, and then you can build it to produce that insight based on the data or based on the requirements that you have. And there are a big list of elements within here from the packaged application perspective. Okay, so that will cover a little bit then on, it was a quick example really, I guess, just that idea of, how do you get started? And so, there are lots of reports out there. There are lots of elements from that packaged application, but it could be that starter for 10 that you need to help you get up and running from that perspective of starting to push that insight out to those particular end users. Now, although that, we started to look at data there, we looked at certain reports, and you might produce something that you asked to produce. What are the attrition rates across certain departments? And so certain elements like HRBPs might find that really interesting because they need to see, maybe over time what those attrition rates were for those departments. But maybe for an exec who manages a particular department, looking at their attrition rate to say it's been 15% for the last 5 years, 10 years, so what? It's a good metric to know, but they might need to analyze that data in a different way. From that 15%, are they losing all their high performers? Are they losing people with particular skills? What are the reasons for those people leaving? And so what can happen is when we look at the reports, we end up with the fact that, it can sort of fall flat in the fact that, it's useful to a certain point, but we need further insight to help those end users. And I guess from that perspective, we're looking at, can those answers be given to you either from completing that proposition from a people analytics or from a Prism perspective? And so when we look at, where does people analytics fit in that Workday reporting analytics proposition? It sits in that insight layer. It's looking at that augmented perspective of giving you that ability to get insight, skipping the analytical journey of having to drill into the data and cut it in different ways, slice and dice. It's trying to provide you with those stories, that insight, that you wouldn't necessarily have to produce yourself. When you look at Workday reports or discovery boards, you have the thoughts, the questions. You want to show a trend that shows attrition over time. Do you look at it by job profile? Do you look at it by job families? Do you look at it by departments? You have to go off and drill into that. There's an exploring or a drilling into the data to give you that insight. Now, from the perspective of people analytics, where would it sit? That population, I guess we'd look here for your HRBPs. So from a HRBP perspective, you want to look at D&I across all of those organizations. Do you want those stories? Other BPs might want to look at it from the questions it asks. So it may be that people ask, where are we losing our high performers? Or maybe people want to focus on organizational composition. So people analytics is designed to cover a whole range of questions that you ask across the organization. So as we just mentioned, it could be for diversity and inclusion, organization composition, hiring, retention, attrition, or talent and performance. Now, there'll be a number of KPIs, and there's a much bigger list available from a KPI perspective if you want to look at these in the later release. That's just been released now in the 23R2. But you can start to look at these KPIs quickly and find the insight. Does it give you quickly for execs or managers or HRBPs the insight they were particularly looking for? But then we can go on and start to look at the different tabs. Here we're looking at diversity and inclusion, and here we can see the different questions that people analytics provides. And so it may be that if you only have a small team that do the reporting within Workday, people analytics can give you that insight that you can start to push out very quickly. And so when we look at the questions being asked, there may be a population within the organization that is looking for this information. So where are the gaps in female representation in management? And so we can start to look at the details of this one. We can see how the metric is calculated. And then we can have that ability to start to drill into the data. So not only does it give us certain visuals that may be relevant to what we want to look at, but it gives us the story. It tries to do that statistical comparison to let me look at, where female representation in management in EMEA is below the company rate, and it shows you this drop in trend. So why is that drop in trend? And it will also then drill into the fact, show you drivers or top drivers or elements. These are the dimensions that help feed this insight. And so when we look at the job profile, so this is managers of global support in this particular area, we can start to drill into that data and see, we have 35 active managers, but only 3 are female. And so we can start to see, quickly, is this a particular area that we need to focus on? Now, when we look at the data, we could obviously drill into the detail, but we can then start to take this to a different level. Is this something we need to push up to execs or management? Do we need to push this down to particular managers of those teams, to Workday slides? Just again, same data, just different formats that we can push out to alert people to an action that needs to be taken. Or do we need to export this to discovery boards? Do we need to do that further analysis and find not only what is happening, because people analytics would have shown us what is happening, but why? Do we then need to have a look at why we have a lower female representation in management in our region of EMEA? And so again, this could all be discussion in between teams, and it could be insight that you can find. Is it because there's been a high attrition rate? So again, you're looking for answers to those questions. Now, as we just shown, that was people analytics, but when we looked at that particular reason for low representation of females in a particular region, and it shows you that particular area, some of the answers to that may exist in Workday, so that's why we do the discovery boards. But some of that data or some of those answers may exist in systems outside. And so this is where we'd use Prism. So Prism is useful to bring in that external data from those from within your organization that you can blend in with your Workday data, so that you can get that insight into why those particular things are happening. It gives you that different perspective. Now, some of those examples could be, you have some survey data, so it could be Peakon. That has a pre-built analytical data source within Prism. So, that employee sentiment engagement type data may give us, what we're looking at if we're looking at why employees are leaving. We may want to bring in things such as total cost of workforce. Do we want to bring in that financial or compensation data to help us understand where costs are or employment spend is within a particular part of that organization? Or it could be historical data, just to name just a few. But the idea is, you want to bring all of this data together into one place to help you be data-driven and give you that ability to push the insights out to the people that require that. And so when we look at this from a Prism perspective, the users, I guess, from this would be, they could be IT or data stewards. It doesn't have to be, but I guess, there is those conversations with who owns that data. And when we look to move that data into Workday, who control that, who can see it and blend it with that data to put before it gets pushed out for people to see. And so there is a small element of technical knowledge, not having to know SQL and those types of things or coding, but the idea of how you join data sets together or how you can transform your data. And so let's do a quick demo then of Prism and what you can see from this particular element. So to stay with that theme, we're going to look at total cost of workforce. And so what we've done in this example, we've used Prism and we've ingested things such as salaries, benefits, shares, all of those types of data. And then we can obviously use that as we've joined it together to give us that one source of data. Now, when we blend it together with our Workday people, we can start to look at the data in different ways. So what we have on screen at the moment is a discovery board. And I might want to show this to say, here's all of my employees, and this is my total cost of my workforce. So that is showing the two different data sources blended together. But then if we want to, obviously, you can start to look at, average compensation ratios and your performance rating. And then we could look to distribute that and show it in different ways. What is that total compensation against our supervisory orgs? So you can see which departments or which parts of the organization where we spend most from a salary or compensation perspective. Now, when we produce this data, this is from a discovery board. This is pretty quick. As I said, it's that self-service drag and drop perspective. Now, once we produce this data, we can start to push that out. And so if this was pushed out to particular teams, we could then have different parts of the organization use this from a quick analysis. But again, they don't want to build the self-service. They just want to do these filters so that I can see, if I look at my benefits department, how does that change? I've only got 2 people and this is the cost of my workforce. So the idea is you could start to build up very quickly ideas of how the particular organization is structured just by doing those clicks and so forth on your data. Now, I guess, as well as using this data in this more visual format, say in discovery boards, it may be that we want to use this data again in different ways, but push it out to different places within the organization. And so one way we might want to do that is, as well as taking all of my salaries, my cost of workforce, could we also bring in budget data? So, if we've got some budget data, can I then start to look and do my cost of budget variances? So I've got what would be the actual spent, maybe on a monthly basis or quarterly basis. and I can use that budget data to do those comparisons to see how we've spent across these different departments. And so then you could start to use different visualizations. So it could have been in a report that we just saw, or maybe it might be more visual to the particular audience that you have if it was on a particular org chart. So when they're viewing the org chart, can they see this data and it's more appealing and understandable or digestible from their perspective? And again, we can see, maybe we've overspent in one particular department. And again, using that data it's the same compensation data, just maybe we're using it for that pay gap perspective. What is it that we can see if we want to view pay gap, for example? So again, we looked at, when we looked at the discovery board, we looked at that total cost of workforce by department. And so, once we've got it in the discovery board, we can then push it out, and maybe it sits on a supervisory org profile. So from a manager's perspective, I could do that filter in a discovery board, or I could just come directly to my supervisory org profile, and I can see the reports and the data that is pertinent just to me and my payroll department. So then I have that ability to look at this by particular teams, and if I need to drill in and find those workers that I class as maybe this is where we spend, but these are the people on those lower salaries. And again, you can do that slice and dice. I want to see this by rating now. So again, it's all the same data, but it's just slice and dice and distributed in different ways. So in my example, Elizabeth is obviously a higher performer, but is on the lowest salary. And again, that compensation data we've brought in, how do you want to look at that from a gender pay gap perspective? So again, on my supervisory org profile, maybe I'm looking at gender pay gap. It doesn't have to be gender. You could look at it from ethnicity. It could be any elements that you want to look at, or it could even be location or region. But the idea is, we can use that data and formulate a trend over time to help you understand historically what was happening. And so when we, as I mentioned earlier, I'm looking at a slide here that says, I'm looking at my gender pay gap over the last 3 years. So this is great. I can see the things are getting better. But this only helps me to a certain point. What if I'm just about to go through my current merit increase and I want to know, well, actually, I can see what's happened in the past, but what will happen when I finish this merit cycle? Maybe my payroll data exists outside of Workday, and so I've had to bring this in via Prism or do lots of different things. Can I have that ability to see what would happen? So the idea is that, can we then look and see, could we put that data, say, in a sheet? And so here you can see, if I can just make that bigger for you, if you can just see, these are my employees in my payroll department. You can see what rating they have, and this is me using this ability to try and look at what's going to happen. So obviously, if you've got a 4 as a previous rating, I'm going to give you a 10% pay rise in this example. Or if you've got a 3, I'm going to give you a 5% pay rise. So based on that information, it looks like my pay gap for this year would obviously get worse. And so it gives me that ability now to start to play, well, actually, if that was the case, can I change that? Before I make my decisions, can I start to change what I'm going to do? And so, yes, you can start to change this. I'm playing with my data. It gives me that scenario, what if functionality. I can start to play. So before I make my decision, if I was to go with this particular range of pay rises, my pay gap then would change for the better. And so I'm getting that, maintain that better performance for my particular team. And so again, this was the purpose of using maybe the sheets. Again, data you brought in from, that might be Prism, that might have been external, but you're able to distribute it to those employees to use for the formats they need. And then if we needed to, the idea that when we look at that analysis, it doesn't just have to be in sheets, it just doesn't have to be in dashboards. We could push that out to different formats, and it may be you want to push things out to managers if they didn't have access to the dashboards. you could push out via slides this information to them. Does this help them with what they need to do rather than having all that, find the dashboard, drill into the report and find that analysis. Now, when we use sheets, the data that we have would be linked. They'll be live. We're not screenshotting the data, although you can, I guess. But, the idea is if you can put that live data in there, so they're live visuals, here we can see from this perspective, my previous pay gap figure, we've made changes to it. You can see that figure will then change in these live sheets as well. So when we want to maybe push this out on a monthly basis, or it could be quarterly, you have that ability to just quickly come in and refresh off your data. You can put commentary or notes on what actions have been taken and how successful they are. It gives you that ability to have that conversation, but you can then start to push these out to those people that maybe don't want that dashboard. They want something pre-delivered to them in a particular format. Okay, and so that covered a little bit there when we looked at Prism. Prism giving you that ability to have what we'd class as a data hub. It's a hub of data for all. Maybe if you've just got HCM, so it'd be just for your people data hub, or if you don't have finance, it could be a finance data hub as well. But it gives you that hub of data for the data you have in Workday, so that you're supplementing that data. It's all in one location, and you can be data driven because you'll have that ability to drill around and look at all of that particular data in those locations. And I guess, as we've mentioned a lot, it'll be in those different formats as well. Okay, so that brought us to the end of that particular demo, just showing where you could then use all those insights that we talked about before, but use that for your Prism data as well. And so I guess that brings you to the point of where you have to look at what is it that those end users or population want, and what format do they need it in. So the data will be roughly the same, but you need to push that out in different ways. And so that brings us to the end of that presentation demonstration. So we're now at that Q&A point. And so I'm just going to have a quick look at those questions, and we'll have a look at...
Hi, Andrew. There is a question from Matilda Elf. Matilda, shall I unmute you so you can ask the question?
Oh, it's okay. I can see it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's okay. So how do I add reports to the supervisory org view? So within, once you create your reports, let me just see if I can show you for the system as well. There is a task that you can use. So if I go to this particular one, configure profile group, you can configure your profile group. And so once I've got a report, I can then start to look for the org view. So I can go to the overview for my supervisory org, and within here itself, I can then start to add my reports. So here you can see the ones I had for total cost of workforce for employees, cost and budget analysis, gender pay gap, and the total cost of workforce by department. So you can start to add your reports into here, and then there'll be, as long as when you configure your report, your filter is maybe something like your supervisory org, you create that one report, and then when you distribute it, all of that, so it's one report, and then you distribute it out to all of those different managers. So they have the ability then to just see the data that is pertinent to the members of the org that they manage. So so that's how we do that, from pushing out those Workday reports and putting them on the org profile. So it is just Workday reports that we support on that org profile. You wouldn't be able to push out the discovery boards, for example. The discovery boards have to sit in Drive on that discovery board analysis.
Thanks for sharing.
No, you're welcome. Okay,
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any other questions? Anyone who would like to ask Andrew a question? Just we're going to give it one more minute. please let us know and we can unmute you so you can ask your question. Thank you.
So while we wait for those questions, I mean, I can just give you one last element that I've seen a lot in questions before, and that is, what skills do you need for Prism? So I guess from a deployment perspective, it's relatively simple from that perspective, because it is just, it's just needs to be enabled in your tenant. But then you have the ability to, if you have that knowledge of reporting, you'll understand, you can bring data in from flat files. You could actually write it in directly from APIs. If it's coming from an external system, you want to write it into tables, you can do directly. And then it's just that knowledge of blending those data sets together. So if you've got two data sets, what is it that joins them? What is it in the external data set that you have that will join it to your Workday data? So you have that ability to set the security. So we're using that same security model, but also then, gives you that ability so that, if you want to click on an object, I can drill off and go, through the rest of the Workday data and not just be stuck in just that one report that I need, that ability to be data driven and go off and find additional insight.
Thank you, Andrew. We have a question from Adam. Adam, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hey, Andrew. I'm just wondering if is there any plans to kind of get the custom and standard reports straight into slides rather than passing through worksheets?
Worksheets. I think it's being considered as a roadmap item at the moment. I haven't seen, so obviously People Analytics we push directly.
Yeah.
And most of them are driven by sheets at the moment. I think it's being considered as a roadmap item. I know they've considered it, I think maybe for discovery boards to push that in, because they're all in Drive. But yes, I've got nothing that I can give you as a
no. I just thought I'd ask the question because it seems you can do it with certain stuff, but not all. It's sort of because I'm starting to use the slides function. It's just I wouldn't say it's a nightmare setting up the sheets for each use case, but it's kind of going through all them jumps to produce the slides.
Yes, well, it would be nice that if you've already done it in discovery boards, you can push that in.
Well, that is it, and it's using some of the prompt sets in kind of the worksheets. If it's just a bit like the dashboard prompts, it's just one set of prompts for a particular organisation. It would be very helpful.
Yeah, no, that's but I'll feed that back into the product management again, and hopefully,
hopefully picks up, Andrew. No, thank you.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Any other questions for Andrew, please? On the meantime, Andrew, can we? Yeah, exactly. Can we talk about next week's coffee morning, please?
Yeah. So just as a, what's coming up next. So next week we are running another coffee morning, looking at creating value with embedded machine learning. So we'll be talking about machine learning from a Workday perspective, what it is as an overall concept, and we'll look briefly maybe from a futures perspective, what's coming from a machine learning perspective and Gen AI. Gen AI being the really interesting thing that really is pushing everyone at the moment. So yeah, we'll be going through those things next week. So if you would like to register for that, I think you could see the QR code on the screen at the moment. So if you do want to register for that coffee morning next week, yeah, you can take that QR code and register for that. So I'll leave it on for
perfect
a minute or so, but yeah, hopefully with that, yeah, no, thank you all. I hope you all found that interesting.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone, and thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. And have a great day, everyone, and hopefully we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye.